Okay, so before we go on to this next module about how we present the company to prospects, there's one question that frequently comes up after this last module on the 6 best practices, which is, well, that all sounds good, but do we really follow the 6 best practices ourselves? You know, uniformly in every business unit, across the board, in everything we do? And the answer today is no. We should, but we don't. And there's a lot of historical reasons for that. What we ought to consider is that internally, those 6 best practices are the target. And we should try to practice them as consistently and uniformly across all parts of the organization. And, you know, we won't get every group there tomorrow, but that ought to be the target. Okay? Because if we really believe in these things, we ought to do them ourselves. I mean, that's pretty simple. Okay, so why is this module in the presentation? The reason this module is in the presentation is we made this other interesting discovery a while ago, which was that except for the marketing people who spend a lot of time working with presentations and with customers, most of our developers, testers, writers had been here a long time, had never once seen a customer presentation. And that struck us as being very odd, because you ought to know how we're presenting the company to the outside world, because, you know, that might affect how you think about your job a little bit. So, you know, you should know how the company is presented to customers. You know, it shouldn't be that that's something you never heard of or saw before. So, what I'm going to do is not do the presentation as though you were prospects or customers. But what I'm going to do instead is, for each slide in the presentation, I'm going to try to show you what's on the slide and what the message is that we're trying to transmit to the prospect or the customer with that slide. Okay? So what do you think the first and most important slide is we show to every prospect? Keystone slide, right. Why? Keystone slide is the one that shows our value proposition. In any sales situation, you're trying to get the customer to part with a big pile of money, right? And in exchange for that big pile of money, you're going to give them a big pile of value. Well, you have to articulate what that value is. And we always start with the Keystone slide. We always have a slide in every customer or prospect presentation that has no technology on it, but just has data that shows that we've been in business for quite a while, that we're a fairly large company at this point, that we've been successful, that we're worldwide, we spend a lot of money on R&D, and a lot of people have adopted our technology. This is actually the most important message on the slide, okay? And why is that? Well, if you're Fortune company number 776, what's your goal in life? You want to get into the Fortune 500, right? If you're Fortune number 133, what's your next goal in life? You want to get into Fortune 100, right? Well, this slide basically says, be like Mike. Okay? If 96% of the Fortune 100 companies use Rational, you know, maybe if you used Rational, you sort of get into that select group. Okay? So this is basically, you know, telling people that by and large, companies that use Rational are amongst the most successful companies in business today. The next thing we always show customers or prospects is that we play in lots of different spaces, okay, and basically 3 spaces: applications, so all financial services, banks, insurance companies, you know, travel, etc. Then a lot of infrastructure stuff, you know, computer vendors, software vendors, telecommunication vendors, all the people that make up the backbone of the internet, and so on. And then a third business, which is basically all of the embedded software. in personal digital assistants, medical devices, automobiles, and so on. So there's lots of different markets that we serve. And right after that slide, we show this one. And the purpose of this slide is to show pretty much how our business is divided up. Now, it's divided up a little differently on this slide than on the previous one. And there's two main messages in this slide. First of all is to give people company names so they can see that our customers are blue chip companies, you know, top of the line companies like IBM and so on. The second thing is to show them that we don't depend critically on any one sector, that we have a very diversified business. Because the more diversified your business is, the more stable it is. So, for example, in the last year or so, you know, everyone knows that the telecom industry has cratered, you know, pretty severely. Well, when customers ask, you know, what's the effect on Rational, we say, well, sure, that affects us. But, you know, that's only 20% of our business. Okay? So this is a very good slide to show that diversification. Now, here's a slide I really wish I had in 1986 when I started at Rational. Because it's very, very hard when a company is new to go out and convince customers to use your products. And it's actually a three-step process. When you first go out, and I did this, I made a lot of sales calls in 1986, the first thing that customers say is, well, who else is using your products? You know? And this is hard when you don't have a lot of customers, because you can't do much reference selling. Then a couple of years go by, and you now have customers that have bought your products, but the projects that they're using them on haven't completed yet. So you don't have any data that shows that your stuff really works, right? You can say, well, we've sold it to company X, Y, Z, and W, but, you know, that's pretty much all you can say. Then a few more years go by, and actually the customers that have been using your stuff have been successful. And now you have a third problem, because many of those customers will not let you use the data because they view it as company confidential and as proprietary and as a competitive weapon. I mean, if you're a company and you've used Rational and it's improved your productivity by 100%, you might not want to advertise that, because then your competitor will go use Rational and you'll lose that competitive advantage. If you really believe you're getting a lot of value out of Rational, you just assume your competitor doesn't, right? So we've gotten beyond that. We've been in business now long enough to where not only have customers used our products and gotten tangible benefit, but they've allowed us to actually use these numbers. Every number on this slide was provided to us by the customer. These are not our numbers, these are the customer numbers. And, you know, these are very, very important to the people who actually buy the stuff, the people that sign the checks, okay? Because very often they're business people as much as they are technology people. And very often they have to justify the purchase to their managers, okay? So if they can go in and say, you know, Ericsson claims that they have 100% productivity increase by using Rational tools, and we know Ericsson is a pretty serious company, this has a lot of weight. So this is one of my favorite slides, but I'm very humble in the knowledge that it took 20 years to make this slide. Okay? Now PowerPoint lets you actually construct it a little faster, but it took 20 years to get the data for this slide. And so this is a very, very valuable slide. And customers take it very seriously. Another thing that we try to show to prospects and customers is that independent of the deployment platform that your software is targeted at, we have a software development platform that can be used for all of them. And this is very important for two different reasons. The first one is that customers, by and large, detest lock-in. You all remember the days when IBM dominated mainframes? Customers used to hate to deal with IBM because of that lock-in. And then Sun came along and there was Open Systems. Remember Open Systems? And then people discovered they were locked into Sun because Open Systems weren't quite as open as Sun said they were. What this says is, hey, if I'm working on Sun today, and in 2 or 3 years I have a strategic change of direction and I decide to go with .NET on Microsoft, I don't have to change all my tools. Okay? I can still use the same tool set. Now understand that in a software development organization, you all know this, what's the most disruptive thing you can do? Change the tool set, right? Everyone has to relearn how to do their jobs. You have to retrain everybody. That's a mess. Okay? So the ability to support people on a variety of platforms is very, very important. The other reason it's important is that some of our customers target multiple platforms themselves. They do development both for Unix and for Windows, okay, or for IBM and for Windows. And for them, it's very useful to have one set of tools because as they move people from one project to another, they don't have to train them on a new tool set. They can basically use the same tool set as they move from project to project within that company. So this is also a very, very useful slide. We spend a lot of time explaining to people that software development is a team sport and that in addition to making the individual people that work on the project more productive, it's critical that you make the team more productive. Now, this is an important distinction because a lot of software tools make individuals more productive. They increase individual programmer productivity or tester productivity and so on. But what's important is to make the whole team as a collaborative entity more productive. And the way you do that is by providing a lot of tools that are common that everybody can use. So things like requirements. You know, everybody on the project should be able to go to a requirements database, look up a requirement, and get the same answer independent of what silo they're in. Okay? Same thing with things like activity management, ClearQuest. You know, there's defect number 417. Everybody on the project, whether it's a tester, a developer, or a writer, needs to be able to go to one place and get the same answer for what defect 417 means. Otherwise, you have chaos, right? I mean, in the old days, developers would have their database, and you know, I mean, it was chaotic. So the big emphasis of these slides is basically to show how our tools help unify the team of people working on the project. Not just the developers, but everybody. This slide talks to the issue of thought leadership, and this is a place where we're on very solid ground. People that work for Rational have published over 50 books. Most of them, you know, really heavyweight, serious books with content. All of the people on this list are full-time Rational employees. They're not contractors or stringers or people that were hired to write an article or a paper. We can legitimately claim that we have more in the way of intellectual property and thought leadership in software engineering than any other company. And I don't think it's even close. The other thing we do is show people that we participate in all of these standards boards. Mr. Acronym Policeman's going to have a field day here. You know, this is once again important for two reasons. One, standards are becoming more important, and the knowledge that we have people participating in all these standards activities means they can depend on our products following those standards and being in the mainstream. And for large organizations, that's very important. There's, you know, increasing knowledge and acceptance that by following standards, you can do things more efficiently and more economically. The second reason it's important is our participation in all these standards activities means that we not only follow the standards, but that we're helping drive the standards. Okay? And this is once again part of this thought leadership thing. Another thing that we talk to customers about is this issue of buying your tools from lots of different vendors. And what this means is you have to deal with lots of different companies. They have different license agreements. You have many different tech support numbers. How many of you have had the experience of calling up a tech support line and talking to them about a problem with a product, and they say, well, what other products are you using on your machine? And you say, well, I'm also using this other product. And they say, oh, well, yeah, it's that product that's causing you the problem. And so you call up the support number for that product, and what do they tell you? Oh, it's the other guy. It's his problem, right? So I had this just the other day. I had one vendor pointing me to Microsoft, and Microsoft pointing me back to another vendor, and neither of them would take responsibility. It was actually a problem with Outlook. Okay? The other vendor was saying it's an Outlook problem. I called the other guy said, hey, nothing wrong with Outlook, it's their problem. And so here you are, the consumer, and what do you wind up? You wind up angry with both companies, right? But the biggest problem of all has to do with this problem of asynchronous product releases. And here's why that's a problem. Most large companies that use tools from several vendors try and make them all work together. Share the data, have the data from one program feed another program, things like that. And that involves a lot of work to sort of glue that all together. And that can be done. It's expensive. And it all works fine until the first vendor comes out with a new release. Okay? You install the new release of the first vendor's product, and what happens? All the integrations break. Right? Because something changed. So you have your people go in and they, figure out what's no longer the same, and they fix everything. And maybe that takes a few weeks or a few months till you get back to a stable environment. And then vendor B comes out with a new release. And you say, oh, I don't want to install vendor B's new release. It's going to break everything again. But if I don't do that, I'm going to fall behind. I won't get the new features. And, I can't, not do that forever. So sooner or later you install vendor B's new release, you break everything again, and you start over again. Well, what happens for many customers is that this results in a state of constant thrashing. Not only is it very expensive to continue to try and re-glue everything together, but they go for long periods of time without having a stable environment. And our customers, told us over and over again, this is driving them crazy. And in fact, it was a problem for us at Rational. Because, we have over a dozen products. We have many customers who use many of them. And we were releasing our own products asynchronously. And it was driving our customers crazy. In fact, it was driving our field people crazy. They said, we can't deal with this. It's just insanity. And that's one of the things that led to Suites. And, the argument that we make with customers with Suites is you buy things from one company. Okay, there's one support number. So now when you call support at Rational, they have to solve your problem. Okay, the person at the support line at Rational can't say, well, ClearCase and Rose don't work together. Or, there's a problem. We're not allowed to do that. They're both our products, right? And we release everything simultaneously. So at specific points in the year, we roll out the entire suite. And if all of your stuff worked before and you upgrade, you get up to the next version of all the products, and they come out of the box tested so that they'll all work together. And our customers love this. Okay? This is something that they view as high value because it allows them to move from one stable environment to the next version of that stable environment without going through lots of thrashing. So suites are very, very important. And today we do about a third of our business is suites. This slide talks to the bottom part of the Keystone slide. Remember all of that services business? That's mostly delivered by the field. And it's very varied. I mean, there's everything from hotline technical support through consulting, help with the products, help with project management, a lot of different ways. but it's all oriented towards decreasing the time it takes for the customer to insert the technology. That number is a little out of date. It should probably be more like 1,800 people in the field today. At any given time, the field, including tech support, is about half the company. Yeah. And that's why later on we're going to talk about the field. Field is a very, very important thing. Another thing we tell our prospects and our customers is that you can't be isolated in this business. People expect you to work with other companies and other companies' products. And we have relationships with all the big players. We have very tight relationships with Microsoft, IBM, all the way down the list. Okay? So, our products are tightly integrated with .NET, tightly integrated with WebSphere. So that's, on the high end. The other thing is we have a set of open APIs which allows a lot of smaller companies to build products that work with ours. In fact, there's over 500 companies that are in our partner program, and they have either products or services that work with our products. And that's useful for a lot of companies because they may want something that Rational doesn't itself produce, but which some other company produces. And so by going with Rational, they pick up that benefit. So that's basically how we present the company to prospects. Was there any new information in there for some of you? Or is that all stuff you all knew? I'm just curious. Was that how you thought we presented the company to customers, or was there anything new in there that you hadn't seen before?